Okay, so we're going to open up the project. So we're going to open up WPI-lib VS Code, and I don't have the project open. How do I open the project?
Open folder.
Open folder. And then I got to find, it's probably in the GitHub folder. And, right, so I select it, select folder, and it'll open it. And how can I tell I'm in the right folder?
If it has Java at if it's robot Java.
Well, so there's multi-folders, right? There's layers of folders, and robot is deep in the folder structure.
If you click the two file things at the top left of your screen, it shows the name, and it also shows the name at the top at the search bar.
Yep, so I can see I'm in time demo 538, I'm in time demo 538, and what folder should you always look for to know if you're in the right folder? Source. If you can see the source folder, you're in the right folder. So sometimes it'll take a few seconds to open the Java projects, but this is largely the code we ended on last time with the buttons, right? Checking raw button A, is A pressed, is A released. And you should all have a joystick so you can plug in, make sure you still got that. So we have talked about buttons. And we said on a joystick you've got buttons. So the first thing we talk about is buttons, and buttons will give you a Boolean, true or false value. So the second thing we're going to talk about is something on the joystick that is similar to a button, but is not a button. It is called the POV. Now, you might have heard the POV called something else. It's called the D-pad. So the D-pad is a POV. So on your joystick, you've got this little guy right here. This is the POV. It feels like a button, but it's not a button. It behaves a little bit differently. So what it's going to do is it's going to give you a number. It'll give you either the number -1. It'll give you -1 if it is not pressed. So if you've just got it and it's just like this, the POV reads -1. Otherwise, it'll give you an angle. It'll give you 0 for up, 90 for right, 180 for down, and 270 for left. Now, if you've got a POV that's got 8 directions instead of 4, which I think this one might, we're going to find out, and then it'll give you angles between those. So if I press the up right, it might give me 45 because that's halfway between 0 and 90. Now, a thing to notice about these, we have negative numbers, we have positive numbers, and we have 0. But notice they're all whole numbers. They all don't have a decimal, they don't have a fraction, which means they are what kind of numbers? Starts with an I.
Radian. I was going to say radians and degrees.
Well, these are degrees.
Integer.
They are integers. There is no fractional part of the number, so they are integers. And so in programming, we have a special name for these. These are going to be int types because they are numbers that don't have a decimal. So we're going to go back over, and again, we're still in robot periodic. So we're going to read out the value. So let's talk about what we do. What do we store values in? What's the name of that special thing? Starts with a V.
Variable.
A variable. And what is a variable? Something.
It's a name, spot, and memory in a certain shape.
It's a name spot in memory in a certain shape. Right? Every variable has a shape and size, and it can hold something. And the thing that it holds depends on the type. So if I want to hold an int, I need a variable that is int. So I do that with int, and we're just going to put int, and we're just going to call it the POV so that we have it. How do we store something in a variable? We do an equals, and how do you read that? Gets or assignment, right? And then where are we going to get the value from? What thing knows the value? My joystick has the value. But how do I get it out of the joystick? I have to use a get command. A starts with an M. Method. And how do you get to the methods? How do you get from the object to its
period.
methods? With a period, with the dot. All right, and the thing we're going to do, and again, you can scroll through. I don't want that. Yep. We're going to use get POV. So get POV will give you the value. So now I've got the value in my POV. How do I display that value?
Smart dashboard.
I use smart dashboard dot. Now for the booleans, I used put boolean. So what do you think you're going to use for the int? If you had to guess. Put boolean, yeah, right? What's a better idea maybe? It's probably going to look similar.
Put value.
Put value, let's see. We don't have put value. Well, if put boolean, put a boolean, how would I put an int? Put integer? Nope. So one of the things it does here is it doesn't differentiate between integers and other kinds of numbers, but it does have put number. And an int is a number. All right, we need a key. So double quotes with a name. I'm just going to call it POV. So those two lines will pull out the value of the POV, and they'll write it to Smart Dashboard, which is a part of Shuffleboard now. So before we can simulate it, what do we have to open?
FRC driver station.
Driver station, right. So we're going to open up driver station. Make sure we've got that open. I'm going to minimize that, reopen driver station, boom. And when you open driver station, that's a good opportunity to make sure your joystick's plugged in and set in port 0. How can you tell if your joystick's in port 0? In what? USB devices tab in driver station. Does it matter where on the computer you plug it in? No, those physical ports do not matter. This is just for driver stations ordering. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to check mine. I go to the USB ports and I can see I do have a joystick plugged into port 0. Perfect. Shuffleboard did open, so that's good. So I've got the code, I've got the driver station. How do I start the simulation? Hit the WPI lib icon. Simulate robot code. Make sure we're using real driver station. So if you look in Shuffleboard now, you've got your POV. It's showing -1 because I'm not pressing it. If I press up, I get 0, down 180. As I move all the way around, I get different values. And yeah, you can see it does have those intermediate values. So yeah, as you move the POV around, you can see the value change. If you go into driver station, you can check the POV on the joystick tab with this ring of buttons over here. So as you move it around, you can see what it is. And so this is an indication that you would have had those intermediate values, like 45, the 135, and so on. And so if you had a joystick that had a really fine-grained POV, you would see more dots in this circle, yeah, in theory. One other thing, just like with the buttons, we have different views. So we can show it as a graph, a gyro, a number bar, a number slider. So if I go to the number bar, it defaults to being a bar between 0 and 1, so that's not super helpful. But you can change that setting too. You can say, oh, well, the minimum's -1, but the maximum is actually going to be, we'll say, 360. And then you can see it change and kind of fill up the slider. So that's another view you can get. And there's a lot of other views for the numbers. Graph, you can see it change over time. But this is another case where you want to make sure the properties are set. So you've got an upper bound, a lower bound. I think our upper bound should be 360. And you can see it plot the values as you see it. Now, some of these aren't going to be super useful for the views we're looking at. Like, I don't really care what the POV is doing, but this is a view that you would get for any number that you're trying to see. So I'm going to change it back to show it as the text view, and we get that back. If a joystick has multiple POVs, you can actually handle that as well. Instead of get POV, we would call get POV with a number here for which number of POV we want. But most joysticks we work with only have one POV. That's really about it on POVs. Do y'all have any questions on the POV on a joystick? Should be pretty straightforward.